It's a great day. It's a great day. I know we've talked a little bit about the Private Practice Network IPA out in New York State. We're up to like 50 tax IDs now, like over 100 locations in the space of a little over a month. And one payer has already said that they'll contract with us as an IPA and negotiate. So like it's just cool. Like I get goosebumps whenever there's even a chance to help private practice be able to get a little bit better juice. So yeah, Chad, I'm riding high. I'm riding high.
Did that just happen this morning or since we talked last?
The 50 tax IDs since we talked last.
Pretty quick.
Actually, I just got off the phone with a guy in Long Island. He's like, yeah, I'm going to join. I'm like, that's awesome because I'm at 49 right now. So come on in.
That's great. Very cool. We normally start with an icebreaker question, but I think you broke the ice fairly well there. I'm sure every single practice on this call is all for renegotiating reimbursement rates and yeah, moving things in the right direction there because we've been left behind pretty good, I would say, private practice.
Yeah, there's some really, and I know that's not the point of the webinar, but there's some amazing people doing some really cool stuff. And so was blessed to meet Gabe of RehabNet on Sunday. There's just, yeah, I mean, what you're doing and teaching practice owners how to approach insurance, and of course, like expanding out beyond just pure fee for service. Thank you for what you're doing too. We need it. I don't want to grow up in a world where I can't get PT. Like it's not a world I want to see happen.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I could tell stories on both ends of the bell curve there. But yeah, had a friend or two in the last year have to close their practice because they couldn't keep up. So yeah, we need the effort. We need it now. We can't wait much longer. Costs are going through the roof to provide care. Reimbursement rates have been relatively flat for the last 20 years. Yeah, good for you, man. Getting it done. Awesome. So icebreaker for everybody that is on here. What you can do is go into the chat. It looks like we have quite a few people on here already and more logging in. You can go to the chat, just share how long you've been in practice and where you're tuning in from. Stephen, you can start if you like.
So I don't own a practice. I'm a frustrated patient, which is why I co-founded Sarah Health. So I've torn my labrum, my meniscus, my ACL, got them all surgically repaired, and compete nationally as an Olympic weightlifter. So it's not if I get PT in a year, it's when and how much. So Sarah was a solution to a problem I felt as a patient and not having continuity between visits. And I know we're going to get into what that means, which means dropping out of plan of care, right? It means not getting the full value out of treatment. And so that's why we created Sarah to be able to help fix that. I'm calling from Kansas City, Missouri. So for those of you wondering, yes, I am going to be wearing red on Sunday. And I know that might make some people log off, but yeah, I'm just enjoying it while it lasts because I know it'll be gone in an instant.
That's great. Yeah. So Chad Madden, I'm a private practice owner and also a co-founder here at Breakthrough. And I've been in private practice for 22 years now. And so if we have a Kansas City representative, I'm in Pennsylvania, and there will be a lot of green. Yeah. In all Super Bowl parties I eventually go to, there will be green only. Although I will say I have an uncle who's been a 50 plus year Kansas City fan, and I can't figure it out how that happened, but good stuff. And yeah, Jared, Dallas, Texas. You've been in practice for less than a year. Awesome, Jared. Anybody else you can share as you're logging in the chat. You can find the chat and just share how long you've been in private practice and where you're tuning in from. And as we're going through here, if you have any questions today, Stephen and I are going to be talking about engaging and reactivating patients. If you have any questions as we're going through, we will have a Q&A session here at the end as well. You can just type your questions in the chat and we'll make sure that we answer them for you. So there's a poll coming up on your screen right now. What are you doing today to keep patients engaged and reactivate them, bring them back in for additional care in the future? So we'll leave this up for a couple seconds. And while we do, I think we got another few in here. Ann Jones from Davenport, testing my social study skill here. I'm pretty sure that's Iowa, right? IA is Iowa. ID is Idaho. Yeah. Had my practice for 2 years, very much on the side of my full-time job, full-time private practice since yesterday. Congratulations, Ann. That's all.
Let's go.
Very good. From Karen, Toronto, Ontario. Admin staff here. Looking forward to our interaction today. Great. Yeah, we just started working with an owner up in Toronto. I'm blanking on Nick's last name. But anyhow, yep, great. Love Canada. So we'll leave this up for another 3, 2, 1. Yeah, you can close the poll down. Read the results here. Email, 16, texting was 20%, and then other. For those of you, looks like we had 3 of you that typed other in terms of what you're doing for engaging and reactivating. You can just type that in the chat. That would be good to know as well. And thanks everybody for answering that poll. All right. So in our time together here, Stephen and I have put some work in together on this about how we're going to go through it and solving at least one of the big problems that we have today in private practice, which was keeping people engaged. So we have more reactivations on the back end. Yeah. So you're going to love it. Make sure you grab something to write on and write with, and then we'll we'll, at the end, we'll be doing Q&A, and then also we'll be talking about an offer specifically around engagement. And I have some data that I can share with you as well. And I even have, something else for my own practice. Last month, we hit a record for reactivations in a month. We had over 200 reactivations, and I'll be sharing with you how we did that. So make sure you hang on to the end there, and you're in the right place. If you're a practice owner, you want to help more people, as most of us do. You want to increase engagement with your patients, and Stephen's the expert here. We're going to talk with him a lot around that. And you want to increase your reactivations. You want to stand out from your competition with better outcomes and plan of care completion. And our agenda here for today, we're going to go through a graduation rate audit. This is a very simple way for you to look at how well you're doing, how likely you are to get reactivations on the back end, and how well you're doing with engagement. We'll talk through a 30,000-foot view of an exam process that we use within our clinics, and I think I've taught it now to over 4,000 other practices. So we've been teaching this for, I think, 10 plus years, but a 7-step exam that leads to higher engagement, better plan of care completion, higher graduation rate, and higher reactivations on the back end. Improving plan of care completion. Again, Stephen's pulled a lot of data for this. Look through the slides beforehand. You're going to love that. And then what's currently working with reactivation. I'm going to share 2 big things that are working today, and then we'll have a Q&A session here at the end. The real problem. So a few years ago, I went back and mapped out, you can go to cms.gov and do this yourself if you're in private practice. But the blue line that is on your screen is the conversion factor on the physician fee schedule. And I went back to 1991, which is the first year that was the origin, the birth of the conversion factor on the physician fee schedule. And then I mapped out every single year, plotted out every single year since then. And if you look at the blue line only, just ignore the green line for a second, that represents reimbursement specifically for the conversion factor, which is really what I get paid as a physical therapist seeing a Medicare patient, right? And many of even the private insurers will base their reimbursement rates on something around Medicare. So if we go back to 2008, which was the highest that it was in the last 30 years, and we map that out to today, is it going up, going down, staying the same? Stephen, I know you know the answer, but so you can just type that in the chat, going up, going down, staying the same. One right answer is all I'm looking for in the chat.
Need a brave soul.
Blue line. I'm fine with awkward pauses. Blue line, which represents reimbursements for Medicare services, going up, going down, staying the same. All right, wonderful. Karen says going down and teetering out. Yeah, that's right. So, and this is even crazier, but if you would look before 2008, the reimbursements that we have today in 2025 are lower than what they were in 1990. In 1994, I was a junior in high school, shadowing in a physical therapy clinic, deciding if I wanted to do this for the rest of my life, right? We had no idea. And at the time, there was a gradual increase again up until about 2008. Now it's regressed below where it was 30 years ago. So Karen, thank you for answering there. Yeah, it's not good. You can see on the left of your screen back in 2008, it's roughly $37.50. And then over on the right-hand side in 2025, it's well below $35 down to like $32.50. So we've had a 16% reduction in reimbursement for Medicare services in the last 16 years. And that does not include the PTA or the CODA reduction as well. So yeah, most of us also during that time, I remember when I was a freshman in college, the graduating Masters of Physical Therapy, that's what we had back then. Masters of Physical Therapy, if somebody was graduating with that degree, the offer, the first year out of school was like 40 to 45K. That has now doubled in most markets. So the cost to provide care is a lot more than what it was 30 years ago. And that creates a lot of problems for us. So space is more expensive, equipment's more expensive, employment costs are more expensive, benefits are more expensive, 401k matching, all that other stuff across the board, more expensive today, and that creates a problem. The green line on your screen is the CPI, so that's inflation. That is our cost to provide care. That has increased 32.5% since 2019 alone, and that creates a lot of problems for us as we're trying to pay our bills and keep our doors open and access to care. So this is the crunch that most of us are facing, we're all going through, and what can we do about it? Well, the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the graduation. It's just called a graduation rate audit. And I want to tell a story about this. This is how effective this is. So we have a partner today, but when her name's Jan Grove, when she was an entry-level DPT, she was right around a year in, and we had paired her with an experienced PTA that I had grown up with. And, she said, my schedule's full, I'm feeling really good about things. And I could see the numbers, right? We look at metrics on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And I knew she was doing pretty good, also very ambitious. And I said, we're going to walk through this graduation rate. She said, how can I improve? How can I be more valuable? How can I have more responsibility? And I said, well, what do you think your graduation rate audit or your graduation rate is? So that's the number of patients who start a plan of care, who meet their goals, and then ultimately graduate from, in our case, physical therapy. And she said, I think it's 80%. I knew that would be amazing for an entry-level DPT to be at 80%. So I said, okay, let's go through this. And I said, here's how to do it. So we did the graduation rate form. You're going to be very disappointed. It's super simple, but I'll share it with you here in a second. You want to select a month to audit. So if we're in February today, I would at least go back to December. So yeah, and the reason that we want to do that is because, you know, if we would only go back to January, if somebody started on January 30th, last Thursday, there's no way that they would be graduated by now, right? And they still have the opportunity to fall off in the future. We want a full month, so we'll go back to December in our case. Start at the beginning of the month, December 1st. Use your EMR system or however you're scheduling patients. And then you just go through. It's very simple. We write the initial for the patient, the first patient seen, how many visits we saw them for, whether they completed their plan of care or not, a simple yes or no. And we literally use Y or N. It's really, really simple. And then their reason for discharge. So, you know, you might have a patient who came and you sent them for, you know, further diagnostic testing, or they weren't responding well to care or something like that. That's fine. Just write that in that column. So 4 columns. Initial, how many visits they were seen for, did they graduate, yes or no, complete their plan of care, and then the reason for discharge. Jan came back a week later and she had seen 20 new patients on the month. And I said, okay, how'd you do? And she was like, and she was down. So she was not looking forward to being accountable. And she said, well, I'm not doing nearly as well as what I thought. And I said, okay, not a big deal, right? We're patient, we're providing guidance and mentorship and everything else. And I said, okay, so what did you find? She said, well, I had 20 new patients on the month. And I was like, okay, what's your percentage? 8 divided by 20 is 40%. She said 40. And I said, okay, so now what do you want to do about it? And she said, let me tell you what I've already done. So, and this is where, I mean, just a finer point here, most of us get management wrong if you're managing other clinicians, where we would go do the graduation rate ourselves. And then I would sit down with Jan and tell her what to do. Never did that. And she had 3 things that she did. And it was basically around keep making sure everybody had a next appointment scheduled. And she put in a process with that with her assistant. So always doing that. And then they would flag patients that needed a next appointment. So if somebody had maybe 12 visits in their plan of care and they only scheduled out 6 or 8, on that last visit, they would have it marked so they would remind that person. There were a few other things she did around like tightening up her census with discipline, but in the end, she made the changes. Fast forward a few months, we did the same exact thing, the same process that you see on your screen here, and then she was over 80%. And today she's running a clinic in Hershey, Pennsylvania, where they make chocolate, and she's doing really well, and now walking other clinicians through doing the same thing. So everybody can do this. This is that absolutely amazing form we created with AI. Very, very simple. Anybody can replicate this, but it forces the clinician to look at what and again, it's best completed by the clinician, not the manager, not the director, not the owner. And for the clinician themselves, the goal is to improve, right? So if you're at 20, the goal is 40%. If you're at 40, you want to be up to 60 or 80. Most of our experienced clinicians that are 2 years plus into their clinical journey, they're able to maintain 80% plus. And here's why this is important. Let's say, Stephen, you do have a clinic, and and you're going to see 20 new patients a week in your clinic over the course of 50 weeks. That's 1,000 new patients. And you're thinking about reactivation in the future. Would you rather email a list of 1,000 patients who've graduated their plan of care or 1,000 patients who've dropped off, right? Very, very simple to see.
Easy, right? And second money is always easier than first money, right? When you think of that's a very sales oriented, but when you have those raving fans that you've created by getting them to graduation, absolutely. Like I'd even say, give me 250 of those raving fans versus 1,000 that didn't graduate, because I bet and you might not have numbers on it, like the lifetime value of a raving fan has got to be at least 5 to 6 to 1 in comparison to a non-graduated.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, because you also, from the raving fan, you also get a Google review, which helps with more attraction, right? From cold traffic, high intent cold traffic, you get a lot of help there. You also get word of mouth referrals from that person. And that you could get your 5x checks right there alone, and you get reactivations. So a person who does not graduate your care, highly unlikely that they come back in the future. Highly unlikely that they leave a 5-star Google review. Highly unlikely that they refer their spouse, their family, any other friends, socially. They're not doing that, right? So this is and again, we're going to talk about engagement here in a second. But that first step, that graduation rate process, is at least going to let you know where you're at today. So before you fix anything with engagement and where you're going in the future in terms of reactivation, you at least want to start with, where am I at today? Big secret, most practices have no idea. So you want to wrap your head around that. So the next thing is, like, once we're aware, once we know that we have a problem or that we're doing really well, how do we improve that? For us, every single time, and we have 45 clinicians, 46 clinicians right now, and we have a bell curve of performance, right? So in the beginning of the career, especially before direct access, we have lower graduation rates, but as confidence improves, as clinical competency improves, as they go and we teach a CO here, 100% of our clinicians have a certified orthopedic manual therapy, and they develop other skill sets, that graduation rate improves. This 7-step exam is the biggest difference maker for us. And what's crazy is, I'm sharing this with you right now. We have clinicians who teach this better than I do. Like, it's in the local universities, they teach it everywhere. But I wrote this down years ago. Whenever I violate this, or whenever one of our clinicians violate this, engagement drops off, graduation rate drops off, and also we don't get the back end reactivation. So 7-step exam, we're going to go through that. Just realize that if you're doing any marketing at all, it fits somewhere between your advertising, your email campaigns, your text campaigns, your direct mail, whatever you're doing, and where they're actually signing up for your service, right? So this connects the dots between taking a person who's interested in your service and helping them become a paying patient. 7-step overview. In the beginning, we're doing an introduction. I mean, the way that we've taught this for years is, you want to be professional, but yet light at the same time. Be personable. So, if I'm walking in and I'm going to take a look at Stephen's status post labral repair, I'm going to say something like, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Chad Madden. I'm the physical therapist that's working with you today." And I'm going to have a nice smile like this, shake Stephen's hand, and we're going to get started. Very, very simple, but also reproducible. So we start there. Impact is, I'm looking for, okay, it looks like you had shoulder surgery. What do you want to get back to doing? Right. So I'm going to ask a what or how question that identifies the functional activities that Stephen wants to get back to. And Stephen says, "I want to get back to
lifting heavy weight above my head."
Great. Lifting heavy weight. How much are we talking?
Let's say 300 pounds.
Oh, that's great. 300 pounds. Right. So now I know exactly what you're working towards as we're going through, because this is going to be a long and arduous rehab process, right? But we're going to have fun together. We're creating a healing environment. We're moving through the process, but I'm always going to come back to lift. I'm going to tie everything to getting back to lifting, at least with Stephen. My documentation might tell a slightly different story. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Get the history. So tell me what happened with your shoulder. When did this start? When did you have surgery? How did you decide to get surgery? I'm going to ask basic questions about that. So you want to give a brief 1 or 2 liner there, Stephen?
Yeah, so I was overthrown as a kid, and in my lifting fun, I figured out I couldn't move my arm past here, and learned that was wrong. So I got my labrum surgically repaired about, let's just say, 3 weeks ago, and now it's rehab time.
So overthrown is you're doing an active movement and you're out of position?
Overthrown is like as a kid pitching, and so weakened it, and then lifting, boom, pop, and now we're here.
Great. So you had little league shoulder growing up, then you had a lifting injury. Got it. Cool. So then what we're going to go through is test, right? These are your objective measures. I'm going to take range of motion, obviously sticking to the protocol in this case with a labral repair. I'm going to do any strength testing that I need to do, any special tests. Look at the, make sure we're not infected, do all of the normal objective measures that you would typically do as a clinician. The next thing we're going to do is we treat, right? So, I mean, probably easiest in this case if you did not have surgery, but if, let's say you had a rotator cuff impingement or another shoulder issue, typically what we're going to do then, we'll go through treatment and then we'll go back and retest. So if I find that, every time you reach behind your back with your right arm, you're significantly limited as compared to your left arm, and we go through, let's say we clear the cervical spine, thoracic spine, spine, work the way out the shoulder girdle complex and treat everything there. We'll go back and retest and just see if we have any improved motion there. Same visit, right? So test, treat, retest. We do that on the first visit. The next thing that we do is we reach an understanding. So if we're talking about the labrum, I'm going to pull out a shoulder model or illustrations, or some clinicians will use like an iPad, whatever you're using. You want to make sure in this case that Stephen understands, here's what you had done. You had a slap lesion. This is the type of repair that you had done. We're going to show that. And this is what we're working through, right? This is what you have going on. You're explaining the root cause of the problem in lay terminology. Think about like fifth grade reading level. If you have like an 11-year-old at home, that's how you would talk with them about a shoulder injury, is how you should be talking with your patients, unless they're a clinician or they have some background, other more complex background. Treatment plan agreement, we have a very simple sheet that we share with all patients. We go through, basically says, here's what we found in the patient's terminology, and it includes like pain, range of motion, strength, stuff like that, again, in their own words. And, the 3 things that they want to get back to doing might have weightlifting on there and getting dressed and reaching up on a shelf or something like that. Hair care, Steve. Hair care.
Got to.
Yeah. So treatment plan agreement, we sign the sheet. It goes through, here's what successful treatment looks like. This is what we found. This is how many visits you're going to schedule out for. And there's a simple consent to treat at the bottom. I sign the sheet. Stephen, you sign the sheet. And now we're on the same page. For us, that just stays with the patient. That is not part of the medical documentation that gets sent off to the doctor. They're 2 different things, but now the patient has something. Stephen, in this case, you have something that spells out, this is what I have going on, and this is what treatment's going to look like for me. So there's no surprises. We then do the financial agreement. So at this point, Amy or somebody from our billing office has called the insurance company. We understand what's going on. They sign the financial agreement, and then we schedule out the full plan of care. Every time that we've seen a highly competent clinician drop off in graduation rate, what we do, and this is a little nerve-wracking, is we go in and we sit and watch them do it all. And what happens is they typically drop out a step. And one of the most common is they'll drop out, getting the history. What have you tried for treatment so far? If they had failed intervention and we don't pick it up, that's going to be very difficult for us to remedy later on, because the person's already thinking this isn't going to work. So that's an important point. But 7 steps. You can take a screenshot of this and make sure that all your clinicians are doing. All right, now we're going to get into engagement. And Stephen, what are we looking at here? A lot of numbers.
It's a lot of numbers. My team likes to joke that my love language is Excel. So if any of them are on, they're probably, just laughing right now that, of course, this is my slide. If you don't mind, that 7 steps to a killer exam, it's so funny. I find it really interesting how many of the things you hit upon is actually what we talked about in the RTM space. Like, it's putting in the patient's terms, right? Like, what are they trying to get out of care, and how is this going to help them? It's setting expectations. And so similar to your treatment plan, right? It's like, hey, these are going to come every day. I expect responses, like all of that. And so I think there's so much power in what you're saying with that 7 steps beyond that you could apply broadly. Now, what's on the screen? So we did a retrospective analysis with nearly 500 patients. And what we found was patients who had access to Sarah got to a better clinical outcome, and then just as excitingly also completed their plan of care at a much higher rate outside of the MDQ group, which we know was small and likely a bit of an outlier, but we like to lead with transparency. And so I'll even put my red up on there for everybody to see. And what I think you can infer here is, when a patient feels more heard, has a way to engage with you in between visits that doesn't have to be burdensome on your clinician. Like, there are really smart ways to do that. They're going to get through their plan of care more often, right? There's hope, there's agency that you're providing to those patients, that in the times where it's a little bit tougher, or like, let's face it, I'm a patient again. I still get white coat syndrome when I come into a PT practice, where I'll forget to tell you something. Like, Chad, right? Where we're working together and you're like, how was the weekend? Like, you saw me on Friday, now it's Monday. How's the weekend? Like, oh, it's great. It was great. It was great. Any pain? No, worked out just fine. Like, all that was good. And then I'll leave. Like, second I hit that parking lot, I'd be like, shoot, I forgot to tell him that on that flight, I was just like in murderous pain, right? Which would have been so helpful to you, right? You probably felt like you were fishing a little bit when you're treating me. Like, come on, there's something I'm missing. And so, like, just know that, right? Like, we're still, as patients, like, you're a doctor or a master of PT, right? There's that white coat syndrome that impacts impacts us, and even though we might have a good relationship, we still want to please you. We want to make you happy, right? We want to look like the good patient. And so by having that engagement and ability to engage, especially in a non-synchronous face-to-face way, these are some of the results that we saw at one group, right? But I think if you ran it in yours as well, you would be able to see in your practices.
Nice.
And then what's, I think, again, back to like the history, right? And agreeing on the treatment plan and going through that process, the patient's story arc matters, right? Like we as humans are like designed and innately attracted to stories, right? And so helping the patient even to see their story, right? Because we can get really bogged down in, gosh, I haven't gotten much better today. I haven't gotten much better in the last 2 days. But being able to take a historical view and be able to look and say, and not just the objective measures, right? So Chad's treating me like, I'm like, man, I don't feel like I'm getting any better. Like, dude, you've gotten an extra like 80 degrees of range of motion. Like, what are you talking about? Like, even though that's objectively true, that doesn't really matter if like that's not what the patient is feeling, right? And so I love this first example because in this example you might see someone that's like, oh, they were at a 7 to 10 confidence in their third check-in and now an 8 improvement. Like they actually might be wondering if they're actually progressing, but then be able to take that back all the way to the first check-in, like 0 confidence, right? 0, and be able to show that story arc to them to show that yes, you are improving, even if the rate is a little bit lower than it might have been at the start. And yeah, I love that. I love that quote. Like I was bragging on, practice name redacted and you today, right? Like how much you get that message as the treating clinician. Like how jacked are you about that, right? Like that's just instant dopamine you're typically not going to get unless you have an engagement strategy with your patients, right? I like to use the analogy of, my wife and I will go out to dinner with another couple and maybe, you've had this experience, you're driving home, you're like, gosh, like Chad and his wife are awesome. Like, they're really, really good people. They were a lot of fun. Like, I love how we talked about this. And you will never tell that other couple that you had such good things to say about them, right? Like that is happening with your patients talking about your clinicians in your practice. And so by giving them a mode, a medium of engagement and communication, you can start to surface those stories and celebrate those with your staff as a team, right? Like, hey, like look at what this patient said about Lucy, right? How cool is that? And so yeah, these are a couple different examples. And Jared, yeah, thank you very much for posting that. Like having that engagement, just it can help you catch bad things, but also it can help illuminate those conversations that are happening outside of your 4 walls that you and your clinicians need to know about.
Yeah, Stephen, I'll share one thing that almost every therapist identifies with. So I've walked into our offices already for the weekly staff meeting and listened to the team struggle around like identifying a patient win because it's tough to do when you're in the thick of it, right? And I mean, I love this where it's objective and I can see it and like telling that story arc, that narrative, that's awesome. And then I'll like walk into the break room though of that clinic and there's like 500 cookies and 13 trays of baked goods. I was like, where did this come from? And they're like, oh, our patients love us. And I was like, yeah, like that's the win. Sometimes it's sugar and flour. Other times it's a word. I think most of us would rather the verbiage that, the word, we want to know the story. So yeah, I love what you're doing.
If I share one specific example too. So and I don't think he'll mind if he does, he'll tell me afterwards. So with John Stephen and his practice rehab specialist. So they had an example, the question to the patient that day was, how's your pain on a scale of 0 to 10? And the patient replied 2 because Lucy, you're a genius. And we see this and we forward it right to John and Bree, and they're like, holy cow, like this is so cool. Boom, next day, like it's an all staff email that we got CC'd on. It was just a really, really cool experience. And I think all that happened within like 3 weeks of getting started with them. And so, yeah, met them at Breakthrough in October of 2022 outside of Chicago. And I believe Marriott, can't remember the exact city, but yeah.
Good for you. I'm thinking Broomfield, but that's where we meet in Denver.
That's the Denver one.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I remember. Yeah, cool. Yeah, John's great. I just hit one of my feeds, saw saw a story on him recently. Yeah, so and thank you, Stephen, for sharing everything on engagement, especially the study. I know your team put a lot of work into that and making a better product for us, which is great with Sarah Health. With Breakthrough, key thing that you need to know here is in 2024, we sent over 8 million emails. We have a lot of data on engagement, and I'm going to share that with you right now for you to see in terms of get you to think about how you can engage these patients that are highly engaged so that they're coming back in for care in the future when needed, or they're sending other people to you. So two big strategies I'm going to share with you. Lots of testing here. The reactivations one-on-one. This is pretty straightforward. Stephen, if you graduated from, your labral tear rehab, let's say it was 2 years ago, I could reach out to you, send you a text, an email, a piece of direct mail and say, hey, Stephen, this is Chad over at Madden PT. It's been 2 years since I last saw you. How are you doing? How's the weightlifting? Pressing 300 pounds again, right? Like I could ask something like that. We know when we send that out, the response rate is about 90%. And for those people who respond, when the clinician is trained in terms of just asking basic questions, like looking for more than a response, right? So Stephen, you respond back and you say, hey, you know what? My shoulders actually bother me. Right now we can have a conversation. When did that start? How long has it been bothering you? What have you tried for treatment so far? 0 to 10, how bad is it? I can ask questions and you're highly likely to come in. We know the conversion's about 70% on that. So 90% will respond, 70% will come back in when they're having pain. The other thing that we can do is, Stephen, you say, my shoulder's fine, feels great. Now I'm stuck. Or I could say, what else is bothering you? Do you have anything else going on? Anything else bothering you? Right? Like one of those questions, and you would say,
actually like having this like lat thing, I don't really know how to describe. And now you've given me like a very frictionless way to get back on this, playing this out, right? But again, as a patient, you don't know how much friction there is just in calling a clinic, right? And so what you've talked about, Chad, is like an invitation. So powerful, so powerful.
Yeah, light lift, easy to do. And I want to help you think about this in a more advanced way. The other thing that we can do, especially when we're talking about reimbursements, everybody on this call, if you're participating within insurance, you have high payers and you have not so high payers, right? There's probably some payers on your list that you're losing money on, a significant amount. Very easy to lose a significant amount of money every time you see a patient. What you could do is you can go through your patient contact list and you can see your better payers. Just if you wanted to hedge your bet and you wanted to think about profitability in terms of reactivations and you're doing this one-on-one, very easy to work through your best paying patient list. Not that hard. The other thing that I want to talk about is for anybody who is not insurance-based and you are cash-based only, we do FRM stands for frequency, recency, money. Outside of healthcare, right? When we're in healthcare, we want to help everybody equally the same. We would give away care for free. We would waive co-pays and deductibles forever and ever and ever. But because we want to keep our doors open, we do have to collect money, right? On the other end, if we were outside of healthcare, if we were doing like pizza delivery or auto repair or anything like that, they will use this concept called frequency, recency, money. So it's thinking about your list in terms of how often people buy from you. A patient that has seen you 7 times over the last 20 years is more likely to be reactivated than a person who's come in once. Recency is how long ago has it been? We find that 6 months to 2 years is a pretty good sweet spot. And money is, the amount of ultimately the lifetime patient value, right? So that's another way to think of it. Stephen, I know you have an important message here on the code.
So CPT code 98977 stands for you achieve that when a patient replies or sends data 16 days in a 30-day period, right? So they're responding over half the time. That's a highly, highly engaged patient during their plan of care. And so exporting a list, whether through the Sarah platform or even through your EMR, say, okay, I want to send a one-on-one message to everyone who has hit that code in the last year, right? So you're going to have people that were really engaged with you and your clinicians, and like that is another way to slice it. And so what we hear some practices do is like, boom, like I just want to know engage patients and like go from there, because high likelihood of a reactivation.
Love it. Super smart. Yeah, any way we can segment that list, that's what we want to do. Simple message of everything that we've tested, some form of how are you to your patient list works really, really well. Just you don't have to overthink it. You don't need ChatGPT to write 50 variations of how are you. Just talk with your patient list the way that you would talk to a good friend. And that's going to work really well for you. The second big thing we can do is reactivation with one-to-many. So the previous slide is where you're doing individual reach outs. We find that our clinicians that do that 8 times a week are full. Very, very simple way to look at it. in the background. And, we can't centralize for our 6 clinics, or if we had 600 clinics, we couldn't centralize that type of one-on-one communication. However, one-to-many, we can centralize it. So one-to-many is where I click a button and I email 20,000 people at the same time. And it's very powerful. There are some trade-offs though. It's less individualized, right? It doesn't come across as I can't ask every single patient, unless I only treat weightlifters, how they're doing with their jerk or their snatch or anything like that, right? Their overhead press. I can't do that. Oh, did I just confuse powerlifting and Olympic?
No, you nailed it. Yep, and jerk snatch, nailed it.
Right. So same idea here. We can have a patient list. We can segment it, right? Depending on the type of software we're doing. Here's the two big problems, the pitfalls that most owners run into that are emailing or texting. We can throw that in there as well. So one is they only do goodwill. They only send out goodwill, month after month. And most that are worried about doing goodwill, they're only doing like once a quarter. So it's highly infrequent. They're not using their list enough, even though that list could be very warm, have tons of reactivations ready to go. We're just not reaching out enough. So I don't want to upset anybody. I'll send out a goodwill campaign, some sort of update once a quarter, and that's all we're going to do. The most common is some sort of newsletter, and that never gets opened because it's a PDF and it's a very bad subject line. And yeah, nobody's going to open that and read it, right? So that's the first thing that happens. The other one, and we've seen this in a few instances, is practices will only make offers. So they're just pounding their list over and over again with offers. That burns the list out. So what do? There's a little mechanism, and I didn't share this earlier, but the co-founder here at Breakthrough, Carl Maddiola, when we met in 2012, he was the head of online sales at Tesla Motors. I was trying to figure out a lot of marketing online. He already knew it because he had been through selling $100,000 with an email campaign and a landing page. So what he said, and what I learned early, is he said, first you want to deliver goodwill. Let's say it's a video on simple exercise you can do for back pain, lat pain. You said lat pain, Steve. So we'll go with lat pain. So we could send out a video on that. What do we know for people that click on the video?
They're engaged. You
Yeah,
got it.
they're engaged and they likely have lat pain.
Yeah.
Right? Or knee pain or shoulder or back, right? It's somebody that's like reaching for a solution. Then we give them an offer. Hey, Stephen, saw you clicked on the video. My favorite exercise for lat pain with lifting, or whatever the name of the video is, my little piece of value there, right? What's going on with your lat? What's going on with your shoulder, your knee, your back, whatever, right? So now we can send out an automated video for those people that click on, that respond to the first email. That's the right way to think about doing it. So we want goodwill, deliver value, and then for those people who respond, we're going to make them an offer. There's a lot more that we could get into in conversion here. Just realize you have to be able to look at what's happening with your email responders, especially if you're doing one-to-many campaigns in email or text. We have a flywheel that we go over for all the systems within our practice. This is the easiest one, where we think about revenue, solving that initial problem, declining reimbursements, increased costs. And there are, of all the practices that we've worked with across the US and Canada, there are 12 things that we see owners doing. They're categorized over on the right in those profit levers. The easiest one to think about, and what we're talking about here today, is marketing for profit and increasing that lifetime patient value. At Breakthrough, we have a system that does just this, exactly what we're talking about. So, and this is, I'm going to share my screen here in a second and actually opened up what our account looks like for the office. And Carl's been building this again for the last 10 years specifically for private practice owners. So do you want to see exactly what we're doing for reactivations today? I can show you how we did the 200 last month. Just click yes. So you should be able to see my screen now. This is for our Harrisburg office. I just opened this up, but yeah, so this is, we manage everything from here, and we're doing a lot more than just email, but I know we're talking about reactivations. We manage all of our workshops through here. We're running 12 a month in-house for the 6 practices. Then we go out in the community and run events. So that's 6 more. We're sending out about 25,000 emails a month, and we do 2 campaigns a month. So there's quite an effort going out, and we do text campaigns as well. So lots to choose from in here. Single reactivation campaign. Just wanted to show you this. All of these are pre-built, and there's a new feature in here. I think there's like 300 email campaigns in here. So if we click one of these, so we'll just single question survey, what we can do is edit this, and we can go through and see what everything's going to say, how often it's going to go out. So this one has a series of 3 questions in the campaign, and very, very simple. And this one is around a survey. This is the most responded to of all time, but it's basically, are you having pain? In the last 30 days, have you had shoulder pain? Or in the last 30 days, have you had back pain? And the first time that we ever ran this particular campaign, I walked in, we had sent it out on a Monday morning. And when I walked into the office that Monday morning, our front desk desk said, "Can you please shut that off?" And I had no idea what they were talking about. And I said, "Wait, what's going on?" And they said, "We're up to like 227 people have responded to this email and we don't know what to do." So good problem to have.
Yep.
And then we rerouted it, and there is a little bit more to it. You have to understand, like, what to say, how to have a conversation. The majority of practices, your competitors in your area are not having those conversations. They view it as a nuisance. You're not going to do that. You're going to learn how to have a conversation with Stevens and Marys that are responding to your email, and they're going to come in for additional care. Yeah, I mentioned the workshops. I mean, this is how we're running our workshops through there as well. We also run our partner workshops through there. The other big thing is, and I know, Stephen, that you love Excel spreadsheets. So with Breakthrough, because of the software and how the data is compiled, everything is reported for you. You can ditch the spreadsheet, at least for your reactivations. You can still have it for others. And I'm a big Excel fan as well. But yeah, what we found is that in working with owners, and Carl and the team have really dove in here and interviewed owners, like what they're doing, how they're managing the multiple spreadsheets. So they would have like a marketer in one spreadsheet, receptionist tracking it somewhere else, owners tracking it in a third place, and they're not combined. Here, all of the data, all of the responses are in one spot. And then we run 6 offices with 2 marketers, and every day they just run right down through the activities list. So all of that data, all of that activity is in one spot. You can have multiple campaigns going on at the same time. Data is really key. Yeah. So the software is called Breakthrough Pro, has everything on your screen that you can see here. All the campaigns are written for you. At a live event, like Stephen, you mentioned earlier, in Chicago back in 2022. We just had one in Orlando here last month. We have walked somebody through an entire calendar build out for 12 months and scheduling that with the click of a button, and it takes about 20 minutes. Like, it's very, very easy to do. And then you can set it and forget it, and then you have email campaigns going out for the full year. Some quick examples here. This is Justin, sent out a single email, 9 plans of care from his first email campaign, over 60 responses. Jordan, yeah, still rocking from, I think Jordan came in probably one of those Broomfield. He is in Colorado with Proof Physical Therapy and Performance. They did one at the event, a single email, $6,000 in revenue while at the event. Pretty crazy stuff. Yeah. Some more complex stuff around cold market campaign. I want to make sure that we have time for questions here. To apply to see the software and see what it looks like in your clinic, you go to getbreakthrough.com/engage. That link is going to be in the chat as well. Just fill out the short form. It'll take you about 2 minutes. And then this is important. There will be a time for you to schedule your call with my team on the next page. Once you fill out the short form, make sure you pick a time. And then again, they'll walk you through exactly what the software can look like in your practice. We have some time here for Q&A as well. While we're at it, how about some love for Stephen on the engagement data and for his team for putting the work in? Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. Jared's comment, like, that's my goosebump moment. A story like that, and knowing that happened with a patient, right? Like, that's, if I had to guess based on the context there, that's probably someone's mother, someone's father, right? That you got ahead of, and that's huge, right? And to know that we could be a small part of one of those ripples that's enough juice to keep me going for the rest of the week at a minimum.
Could we read it?
Yeah, you do it, because I honestly, I might get emotional doing it. So I'll give you.
Great. Sarah Health recently helped me catch a patient who was struggling with orthostatic hypotension in between physical therapy sessions. By being alerted to this change of condition, I was able to direct her to her doctor to make medication changes before a more serious event occurred. The more I use Sarah Health, the more I understand the benefit for patients and therapists. You're 10xing your communication, right? Easily. 100x. I mean, how many exchanges are I have so many questions now reading that, but yeah, love that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jared. Very
The
good.
question is, how many exchanges are like that? Like,
No, I was going to say how many, like, versus like a baseline treatment, what most clinicians are doing. How many more touch points do I have, working with Sarah Health?
I'd say on average, you probably get 16 to 17 more data points, and that's with everybody. That's with people that just say, get one text and like, I'm out, like, this isn't for me, all the way to people like Chris Gordos. He has folks that are on for like 4 months, like the entirety of a longer plan of care, that are still responding like 23 days out of the month. And so you're talking about a lot of valid data, right? So like, I use that example, hey, how's the weekend, right? Oh, it's great, except for I forgot to tell you about, my flight about, killed me about about knocked me out in pain, like that, they just, I don't know, that's the world we want to create, and to see it happening more and more and more is just super exciting.
Yeah, nice. So in that case, that was the extreme patient, 80 to 90 more touch points than we would normally have.
Yeah.
Crazy. That's awesome. Thanks again, Stephen, for doing this. And thank you all for being on here. Again, that link is getbreakthrough.com/engage. And yeah, this was great, man. Thanks for having us.
Hey, thank you for having me, Chad. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining. It's been a blessing.
See everybody.